If you're an author or plan to be one, get excited because this podcast is for you. Book Marketing Mentors is the only podcast dedicated to helping you successfully market and sell your book. If you're ready for empowering conversations with successful marketing mavens, then grab a coffee or tea and listen in to your host, international best-selling author Susan Friedmann.
Thank you to all of you who submitted an entry to last week's 300th episode challenge. And I have a winner to announce. Drum roll, please. The winner of our 300th episode challenge is Dee Bowden of Frederick, Maryland, and Dee will win a year's subscription to the Book Marketing Mentors premium membership site. So congratulations, Dee, and again, thank you all for submitting your entries. And now, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to Book Marketing Mentors, the weekly podcast where you learn proven strategies, tools, ideas, and tips from the masters. Every week, I introduce you to a marketing master who will share their expertise to help you market and sell more books. Today, my special guest is Robbie Samuels, a passionate entrepreneur who's been recognized as a networking expert by Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Inc., and as an industry expert in digital events design. He helps his clients ensure their online events run smoothly with less stress and greater participant engagement, as well as helping them discover prospects who are ready to buy whenever they launch a new product or service. He hosts the On the Schmooze podcast and a weekly virtual happy hour, No More Bad Zoo. He's the best-selling author of Croissants versus Bagels, Strategic, Effective, and Inclusive Network at Conferences, and his latest book, which I know he's going to talk more about, Small List, Big Results. It's been several years since I interviewed Robbie, but we have kept in touch during that time. But he has been making an incredible name for himself in the meantime. Robbie, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you back to the show. Thank you for being this week's guest expert and mentor.
Thank you for having me.
Robbie, you have done such an incredible job with not only your first book, The Croissants versus Bagels, but now with the brand new book, The Small List, Big Results. We need to talk about launching your book because I know that our listeners always want to know how to do it successfully. And there are so many myths out there and so many ways in which you can do it and you shouldn't do it. So put us straight. What's the best way or the Robbie Samuels way of successfully launching a book?
I would start with don't keep your book a secret. I think too often writers are, just heads down, creating content, not talking to their likely readers, not letting their network know, and then suddenly one day, out of the blue, announcing to the world that they published a book and nobody really cares. And it's really demoralizing. You need to reach a point where we're willing to talk about what you're crafting while you're crafting it. I was doing this with my second book. I actually started writing it in 2018 after my first book was very successful. My first book, I had 150 reviews within a week of my launch date, and it's now at 190 global reviews. And my second book, which the launch date was this past Sunday, it now has 138 reviews. It's on track to surpass the first one. A lot of that was people were really rooting for me, rooting for the book before the book existed, and were helping me create the content, even starting back in 2018 when I first started working on the book.
Whoa. So those are some pretty staggering figures, especially with reviews. And I want to talk more about that. But you start off by saying, don't keep your book a secret. How do we start announcing it to the world? At what stage? So you talked about the fact that people helped you write the second book or gave you information to help you write the second book. Talk us through what you did to, let people know about the book? At what stage are you? 6 months out? Are you 12 months out? Talk to us about that.
The second book was in response, The Small List, Big Results. The subtitle is Launch a Successful Offer No Matter the Size of Your Email List, is in response to my experience working with entrepreneurs, coaching entrepreneurs around product market fit and lead strategies. Like, how do you find more leads? I noticed that a lot of people were doing common mistakes, and there's another way. So I outlined the content, literally just created an outline. And the first thing I did was I hosted 2 masterclasses. These were free. And I just let my community know that I was working on the content of a book and that I wanted to sort of talk through what the pieces were and get their feedback and see what I'm missing that might need to be included that I'm not even thinking about. There might be a better way to explain it. There might be a story I can include. There might be like a concept that I need to flesh out. There are 2 masterclasses where I had an outline. I talked through the outline. And I will tell you, a big part of that was I had to get the content out of my head. I'm not a person who feels drawn to writing, which is a funny thing to say, having published 2 books. But I needed to get the content out, and I wanted to make sure that whatever I put in the book was relevant to my audience. And so actually at robbiesamuels.com/masterclass, those classes exist, and they're now opt-ins on my site. And there was a third one I did because there was a concept in the book that was really resonating with people around discover your ideal client. So I did a separate masterclass just on that concept to really flush that out. And then I ended up putting the whole project aside. I wrote about 20,000 words in 2018, but I didn't have a plan for what came after the book. And the first time I published a book, kind of the same thing. I had a goal around doing online programming or a course or a group program, and I felt my way through it. And a lot of what I learned in the process is in the second book. But I knew I didn't want that to be. I wanted to have a much better business plan related to the second book. And I had other things going on in my business. So I let go of it for the moment. And I ended up coming back to it, strangely enough, at the height of building a new business. So as you probably know, in 2020, my business was all about in person, and I had to reinvent. And I became a virtual event design consultant and an executive Zoom producer. And I grew a very successful 6-figure business in 8 months. And so this book is really, the second book is an answer to the question, Robbie, how did you do that? But it's even more so, how could the reader do it for themselves? So I needed to, now the book had a reason to exist. And I came back and wrote the last 7,000 words and finally got it done. But even in August, when the book was still being finalized, there were lots of other ways that I was bringing it to my community.
There was constant keeping in touch with people. I love the idea of doing these master classes and getting people's input and running ideas by them. And as you said, asking them for stories, things that you wouldn't necessarily have come up with. So that's brilliant. Talk about the reviews. You've got all these reviews and the book isn't even out yet, or it's just being released. How did you go about that? Because that's a question I get all the time. Susan, how do I get reviews for my book? How do I get them? What's your secret there?
Asking again and polite persistence and systems, and asking again and better systems. I've been on lots of launch teams. I actually went back through my Amazon and realized that I had written over 50 reviews for authors. Most of those people asked me once and didn't do any kind of follow-up. And then it became a to-do item that I couldn't remember what it was, who had that book. And I would, have to hunt through my email and try to find it. It becomes a point of stress. And I didn't want that experience. So my first and second book, I had a very thoughtful launch plan. I built a large launch team. This time, though, when the book was still in the final stages of editing, I actually did a few things to bring it back to the public eye. One, I asked for feedback on the title, and it changed the title dramatically and the subtitle dramatically. And I asked for feedback on the cover, and that also changed the directory of the cover. And I also launched these pop-up masterminds, is what I'm calling them, where people took an action from the book, which is called Wake Up Your Network. And they took the action, and then they came to a 2-hour program with 7 other entrepreneurs. And it's $100. It's not like a huge expensive thing, but it was a way for me, before the book was public, I had 50 people go through this program. I did it 7 times. And that was sort of a nice base. These are people who had tangibly worked on a piece of the content and sort of proven the validity that it was really useful. Part of the launch team was that as I was getting the word out there about the pop-ups, masterminds, the book title and the cover, when people were like, oh, this is really interesting, let me know when it's out, I said, here's my sign up link. And so I have a landing page that people would sign up to join my email list. And then they immediately would be sent to a Google form where I would gather additional information. And you know this because you went through my process both times. And it's from that I was able to gather this. And I don't know my last count, but I'm definitely over 500 people on my launch team. And I will tell you that just having people on your launch team doesn't equal having reviews, because I don't have 500 reviews. Maybe a third of the people will follow through in the end. But yeah, that's why you need a large team.
Talk to us about that team, because you've mentioned it a few times, building a launch team, having this launch team, using this launch team. Talk to us about how you're building it and what the expectation is for someone to be part of your launch team.
I ask people to set an intention that they're going to write an honest Amazon review and post it in a timely manner. That is my request from them. In response, I am going to hold them to it and provide the support needed to help them follow through on their best intentions. And when they do, we will both feel awesome. That is sort of the promise of joining my launch team. I also promised that they were going to get a little behind the scenes of a strategic book launch. And in fact, I will be running a book launch debrief masterclass just for my launch team members in December after the dust has fully settled, to let them know how it all went and how it resulted in business for me. I think it attracted a lot of different kinds of people for different reasons. Some people were drawn to the content of the book. Some were really excited about seeing the process of the launch itself because they're an aspiring author, or they are an author and they want to relaunch their own books. I also offered a couple of things that I'd never done before. One was the advanced copy went out on October 5th, and October 12th, we hosted a librarian-led book club discussion. One of my coaches is a trained librarian, and so she led this great conversation where we just invited people to respond to different questions we posed, and they came on air during a virtual meeting. So I think that helped people, give them a reason to read the book in that week, so they'd have something to talk about at the book club. And we had 60 people on the call, so it was a really good number. We just had a virtual launch party. A couple hundred people signed up for that, and about 100 came. Susan, the book in itself is important, but I think the realization I had at my first book, about a month away from publish date, was that the publish date was just really the beginning, not the countdown day. And so that was such a helpful shift in my mind. The book, this second time, yes, it launched on October 31st. And yes, now a few days later, we have 138 reviews. That's not the end goal. I'm now leading people to a much bigger offer. And the whole process of this launch is about getting people ready to say yes to the offer because they know that they need it. And so it's not so much selling something to them, but making something available. So I think the book was part of this much more lengthy launch around a program.
So many different avenues. I'm like, okay, which one do we go down first?
I know.
You said something that caught my attention, and that is relaunching a book. Because often, an author makes mistakes the first time around and it didn't do what they expected it to do or wanted it to do. And there's this big disappointment. And then the question is, Susan, can I relaunch this book? And I'm like, absolutely. I've got books that I wrote in 2007 that are still going because, I keep it fresh in people's mind. But talk to us about the idea of relaunching a book that's already been out there, let's say, for a few months, maybe even a few years.
First thing I would say is, for every author, you should know that there's a difference between your publish date and your launch date. For my second book, it launched on October 31st and it was published 3 weeks earlier. But that was because my first book, I only gave myself a week to get everything done, and it was very stressful. This gave my launch team 3 weeks to get their reviews up. And one of the things I do, I didn't mention earlier, Susan, is I ask my launch team to send me the review via a Google form. That was an upgrade from my first time. I was doing a lot of cutting and pasting last time. And that way I then can turn around and send it back to them with instructions for how to post it on Amazon. But I also now know they have written the review and I can follow up with them. I think if you published a book without doing any kind of fanfare and not having a launch, before you would relaunch, I would recommend reaching out to someone like Susan and making sure your cover is a solid cover. Because if you were self-published like I am, and you didn't have good resources, or you didn't have the money, or you didn't have good, support systems around you, you might need to touch up your cover. And it's a really, really worthwhile investment. I love the person I'm working with. It's not even the most amount of money, like compared to editing or something. You might want someone to go through and re-edit to tighten it up, depending on how much money you spent the first time. My first book really had a copy editor, which is different than a content editor. And then I think you just need to have a reason, make up a reason for why you're relaunching. It could be on the year anniversary. I've worked with people who are doing year anniversary celebrations, some sort of holiday or anything. It doesn't need to be a reason per se, but you just sort of pick a date and you do the launch the way you should have done it the first time, by building a launch team and like building some momentum around it, getting those reviews in. I am a podcast host and I get pitched all the time by podcast placement companies for authors who just got a book released in the last year. And I'm amazed how many of them have fewer than 20 reviews. They paid thousands of dollars for this company to try to get them on my podcast, but they didn't make the effort through their own network for free to get reviews showing the book is valid and necessary and needed in the world. I just think of it as social proof. Aim to get 50 reviews on a relaunch or your initial launch, and I think you're going to be in a good place.
That's fantastic. Another question is about Amazon. There are so many myths about Amazon, and one of them I know is that authors think, oh, all I have to do is post my book on Amazon and sit back and let the orders come flooding in, which couldn't be further from the truth, as you and I both know. But talk to us about how you use it, because many times you have referred to the fact that people have signed up on your list, which is exactly what you want people to do, because if they buy it directly from Amazon, you've got no idea who this person is who bought this book, but you want to build a relationship with that person. Talk to us about how you use Amazon and how that works for you versus having it on material on your own website for people to sign up. Talk to us about that differentiation.
I create a landing page, and I happen to use Lead Pages, but you could do this through, MailChimp. Any of these services have some kind of landing page. I use Lead Pages. So I have this standalone page that has information about my book. And when you click the button to get the book, there's a pop-up that says, before you get the book, I know you're going to want support in implementing the strategies in the book. Why not download the bonus content now? And the bonus content for this new book is the Big Results Toolkit. And it's, 6 different resources, including an hour-long replay, 2 workbooks, several worksheets. Some percentage of people, when they see that opportunity, they sign up for my email list right then. Then they're directed to the actual Amazon link. The other thing I have is in the front pages of the book and in the very last pages of the book, I have very big, read this. I was on the page, and it is an invitation to go and get the Big Results Toolkit from a link that I, wrote out. And that is actually, for this second book, is doing incredibly well because it is very relevant to the material. My first book, for the paperback, I gave away the audiobook that I recorded myself and I never put on Audible. So the only way to get the audiobook files is by buying the paperback. And for the ebook, I had some of the content from the book as podcast episodes as well as blog posts, and I organized them into individual PDFs so they could be easily shared. It's basically a way to share some of the concepts with a team. And that converted really well too. A lot of the content for both my books started out as blog posts. That's kind of how I get the writing out of my head. But to me, it's I want people to come, like you said, to my world. I don't want to just send them to Amazon. Amazon is a search engine. So you want to make sure you've got great cover art, great title, great, keywords, great placement of, what categories you're in. There's definitely people who can teach you a lot about that. But for me, I know that I have to do my own effort. The launch team helps with that. I also hire a company to run promotions for me. So I have 2 days that were free and 3 days that were 99 cents, where they got me listed on like BookBub or Buck-a-Book or whatever these places are called. I love that I don't have to know that. They have the relationships, they set that up. There's a point where the hustle is just not worth it. And I'd rather like pay a competent person to do it for me. That's going to drive traffic. Before that happened, I wanted to make sure that my community got me over 100 reviews. I felt like it was my job to get the book to 100 reviews before my launch day, so that when all these people from outside my network see the page, it's, oh my gosh, this is a great book. Look, people for weeks have been like writing all these great comments. So yeah, that was sort of the strategy for how to utilize the Amazon experience.
And what about the whole Amazon bestseller status? I know it's a game. Did you play that game?
I do the kind of the longhand version of figuring out which categories. Like, I understand what rankings are competitive or would be difficult to get number one. One thing is to know that you can have 10 categories. It's not obvious, but I chose 10 categories. A step up this year was I then met with someone who helped me figure out 10 categories for Canada and 10 categories for Australia, which are two other places that I have a decent following. And so I hadn't thought to expand my categories in other country sites. So that was kind of cool. I hit number one in 2 US and 2 Canadian categories in the first 3 weeks before it was even like formally launched. Hot new release, number one new release in 2 categories before it was launched. And since then, several others. I'm hitting number one already today again. Like, for me, it was exciting to hit. I was a number one new release for women in business. The reason that was exciting is because it wasn't a subcategory. Some of these categories can get kind of small, and that's the game part, right? Like, 2:00 in the morning, you hit number one for 15 minutes. That's kind of the game. But I think that it's worth getting ranked high. When I do free, I aim to break the top 100, and I've done that with both my books. So if you can break the top 100 free for your free day, then Amazon does a ton of promotions for you. I get reports that my book is being emailed to people. It becomes this hot new release. So I don't do ads. I'll wait a few months and I'll do ads eventually, but I'll let the kind of groundswell around the launch itself carry the book for at least a few months.
Amazing. Talk to us about categories in Canada and Australia. Are they different? You say that, you looked at having somebody help you with those. Would you list them as different categories in those countries?
This is one of those, so annoying. The listings at Amazon.com are different than Amazon.ca and Amazon.co.uk, sometimes just very slightly. One will say business and investing, and the other one will say business and money, meaning the same thing, but it's a different listing. And sometimes the subcategories are slightly different. It's just a matter of going to each site. And I met with someone who actually had a whole system for doing this. But going to each site and going through the tree and looking at the different categories, you want to do this because you want to go through the contact page and let the company, KDP know, Amazon know, here's the categories that I want listed for Amazon.ca. And then here they are. And then you've got to check to see whether they actually get listed. They don't always do them. So I will say it's like a little bit of a fuss. It's not the easiest thing, but it's worth the effort. It's very gratifying as a content creator to have your book be recognized. And I think hitting number one in a category is just, it's a nice little ribbon, but it's not, for me, it doesn't translate to more money. I guess some people, they put a lot on the claim of being an international bestseller. And I guess I am an international bestseller. I have hit number one in categories and different Amazon sites, but I'm not going to rebrand my book as an international bestseller because that to me screams self-published new author. And I'm trying to be seen for the value of the content of the book.
Fabulous advice. I wanted to talk about a few mistakes. Another thing that I want you to talk about, and maybe we can take this over to the premium members site, and that is about launch parties. So keep that hidden up your sleeve, and when we pop into that studio, we can talk about that. In the meantime, give us a few hot mistakes that we should avoid in this arena.
Sending people information. Like I've seen people say like, hey, everyone, check out my cover, right? Which is, helpful feedback, also subtle marketing. And then people say, I want to join your launch team. And they just comment in the comments. If you don't have a way to gather all those interested parties into one place, you are just going to lose your mind. Before you share your title or your cover art or whatever it is you're sort of putting out into the world, set up a landing page so that you can gather everybody in one place, get people to commit in to the process. Because if you have to keep checking all the posts, like that will just, be a lot. One of the things we did this time that I think was helpful, but took a little more coordination, is that there were 2 voices coming from my launch team. There was myself and then my business systems and processes coach, Mary Williams. And so figuring out which email came from which voice. What was nice was that people were replying to her or just sending notes to her because they didn't want to bother me. But it was like another. So I think having a second person this time around was very helpful. I didn't have that the first time, and I definitely felt the workload was a lot. So thinking about who in your life can kind of step up to help you co-captain. I also used a book funnel to help me share the advanced copy this time, which was great, except that when that book funnel was finally set up, I forgot to kind of I had the automated message telling people, welcome to the launch team. And I really should have updated the note sooner to be like, and here's the link. Like there are ways in which these are processes and systems that could be tighter so you're doing less manual work. There was definitely some moments where I was a little late to update something in one of my many versions and copies. But I think the humanness is real, and the fact that I'm genuinely excited about the content and not salesy about it helps. But I think you've got to have a real plan for reaching out over and over again. I will say one cool thing that I did was towards the end of the launch, when it was like I'd asked several times now, I gave people an A/B choice. A being, I'm really busy right now, but I fully want to do this. I just need to come up for air first. And B is, I'm not sure if this book is for me. And then I was like, if you think B, read below. And if you think A, just let me know. And I got 50 people hit reply to say A. And some of them literally just said A. And some told me the story behind what was stressing them out. But that means that I now have 50 people that I can, in 2 or 3 weeks, follow up with and check in with it again. So it's just helpful to know that there are people out there who want to help, but they can't right now. And I totally get that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I know that passion sells. It's one of the things that I say when people say, well, I'm not a salesperson. I don't want to get into selling. It feels yucky to me. And I said, the best thing is your passion about the book. And then when you've got that, as far as I'm concerned, can really sell much more than any technique that you use. Robbie, if our listeners wanted to find out more about how to get in touch with you, because you have got so much incredible information that you can share with them, how can they do that?
Well, the cool thing is that my book, the second one, has a lot of great information that I think would help authors build their community around the book, because it's all about how do you build an audience before you release whatever your solution or offer is. And you can get a copy of the book and the bonus content, the Big Results Toolkit, by going to robbiesamuels.com/Susan. So there's a special landing page I made just for you, Susan. And it'll give you the opportunity to also see a little bit of my systems, right? It's where you're going to go to this landing page and you'll be invited to grab the copy of the bonus content and join my email list before being sent to Amazon. But also robbiesamuels.com is just generally my site. And I would love to connect with people on LinkedIn and just, say hi and stay in touch.
Fabulous. Well, listeners, there's a gold mine of information, not only in this, but in Robbie's brand new book, Small List, Big Results. Yeah, make sure that you grab your copy. And always like to end off with a golden nugget, Robbie. So if you were to leave our listeners with those final words of wisdom, what would they be?
You've already met 80% of the people you need to know to be successful. It's time to wake up your network.
Ooh, I like it. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And thank you all for taking time out of your precious day to listen to this interview. And I sincerely hope that it sparked some ideas you can use to sell more books. Here's wishing you much book and author marketing success.
The time is now to take action and finally build your book-selling empire. And the great news is that Susan is here to help you. Visit bookmarketingmentors.com and sign up for a free 15-minute book marketing strategy session with Susan. She'll help you discover your first steps to marketing and selling your book. Only those who take action are rewarded, so visit bookmarketingmentors.com, and we'll see you again next week.